What is going on, everybody? Deathspread here. Welcome back to another video. For those who have watched my channel before, we got a new avatar or mascot, or I don't know what to call this thing. I don't know. It's a thing. It's a guy, and I think it's pretty darn cool. And I learned a lot about vector art in the last few days, but we're not here to talk about that. So I don't know. This is my first time ever using a PNG on a YouTube video like this for a character. So let me know what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it, please. I'm open to feedback happily. That all said, what are we here for today? We're here for the Amazing Digital Circus. I've got about 34 notes to go through, roughly. I believe it's 34. And to make a long story short, I love this series. I've been obsessing over it for a little bit now, and much to the chagrin of myself, I wanted to make a video talking about just some things I've noticed rewatching episode 1 so many times after episode 6. A lot of these are going to be obvious. A lot of these are going to be a whole nothing burger, and I'm going to say a lot of things that probably mean literally nothing. Like, they are just, oh, look at this, that's cool, or this guy is an idiot, why would you think that way? I am just throwing all this out there because, again, I've noticed these things. Just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm at personally, I am in the middle of a couple creative projects right now, and I've been focusing a lot on how stories work and operate, and I'm trying my best to kind of look at this show separated from any and all noise outside of it, including the fandom, and just looking at what we have. What is the face value? I'm not looking at what Gooseworks has said on Twitter. I'm not looking at what the voice actors do on YouTube or whatever it may be. I'm looking strictly episode 1, the full, whatever it is, 22 whatever minutes. What do we have in that time span? Episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where are we at? What do we have? And what are things that have been planted behind the scenes in front of our faces, hidden in plain sight, that we may or may not have missed? Again, I don't think anything that I've seen is new to anybody, but just in case, and also this is just kind of fun for me because I love the series so much, I just wanted to go through and point out quite literally every single little thing I thought was noteworthy about this series. So, with all that said, let's jump right into it. For note number 1, Jax says, just keep grabbing at it, that worked for all of us, while Pomni is trying to grab at her VR headset. Now, I don't know exactly where all the characters stand with how they got into the digital circus. I do know that there were many videos recommended to me based on how they could actually have gotten there, and also episode 5 did in fact give us a little bit of an insight to how they got there, but it was a lot of nothing. There weren't any hard answers, and to my knowledge, the other episodes never actually give us a solid answer. We did get a lot of Pomni's backstory, of course, being the primary protagonist in the series. We understand a lot more about her viewpoint and where she came from and everything else like that because we're seeing it through her eyes. However, Jack's saying here, just keep grabbing at it, that worked for all of us. So obviously a lot of VR headsets on. The question becomes, where are they, right? Now, we're going to get into a note later on that talks about the CNA offices and Pomni's reaction to seeing a desk, but it is interesting that this is confirmation they in fact are in VR, and they're all sitting there basically comatose with a VR headset on, and it's not just as simple as, oh, they're stuck in a video game. No, they literally are stuck in a VR headset, and each one of them has a shared experience. For note number 2, at 2 minutes and 50 seconds in, Jax says, though Kinger's supposedly been here the longest. Now, this is pretty much all but confirmed. As far as I'm aware, we know for a fact that Kinger has in fact been there the longest. But it's interesting that Jax says, though Kinger's supposedly been here the longest, because what that indicates is they work off the word of each other, right? So, you come in and there's, say, 4 other characters there, you're the 5th character. If everybody tells you he's been there longest, all right, it is what it is. He's been there the longest. But he's clearly not in a mental state to be able to ask most of the time, so you're never really going to understand, yes, he has been here for X amount of time, because you are only working off the word of others. And the problem with this is the game of telephone, right? So Kinger's supposedly been here the longest. While that, I believe, is true, what if it wasn't? And then that brings into question a lot of what we're told may or may not possibly be from an unreliable source, because it's all from other characters that have since abstracted and are no longer relevant to the digital circus. So just that little word supposedly puts the entire series into this sort of retrospect, I guess, after you watch it, of, okay, but how much of this was fact and how much of it was what they were told by other characters who are also only working off of other characters' words. For note number 3, at 3 minutes and 3 seconds, Pomni starts panicking. Now, what's interesting here is it's almost the same exact style of showing a panic attack as episode 4 with Gangle at the end when she is closing. I relate to the episode on so many levels you don't understand. And episode 6 with Jax over the sink. So the question becomes, what are they showing us in these instances? Are they showing us that this is what it looks like when a character panics, or when a character gets close to abstraction? Given that Pomni's whole worldview has just been shattered, there is definitely an argument to be made that yes, she's close to abstraction. The problem is, you could say the same exact thing about it not being abstraction. She's just having a panic attack because of her whole world has been shattered as she's trying to process it. This isn't her abstracting, this is her trying to process all this information at once. Same thing with Gangle. Difference is, Gangle didn't have information to process. Gangle just seemed to kind of be ready to, I hate to say it, give up, right? But it still has that anxiety, that pent-up panic inside of you of just, this is pointless, this is meaningless, none of this matters, stuff like that, and it just becomes an overwhelming sensation. And Jax, same exact feeling, but in a different situation. Jax in episode 6, as you know, with the argument, ended up having the same effect over the sink. Is this a panic attack, or is this abstraction? If this was a lesser show, I would say it's a panic attack, but I really don't know. And if you notice, the eyes on Pomni here are the same exact as the eyes effect on Jax in episode 6. For note number 4, at 4 minutes 25 seconds, Kane says the word frisky. I guess frisky isn't considered profanity. I mean, I get it's not. Like, this isn't an actual cuss. It's not a cuss word. It's not a swear. I get it. You're not saying any sort of bombs. But frisky isn't exactly what I would call family friendly. And the reason why I point this out, does this show that Kane was already losing it before we even started? Because if he is now starting to say frisky, right? Like, oh, the moon's getting frisky. Well, okay, that's fine, but he just gave a whole lecture to Pomni about being family friendly. So, for him to say something that's not family friendly, I think brings into question not just how is he losing his mind, but how long has he been losing it? And it seems like it's well before Pomni. I could be looking way too far into this, but I think this really does show this is not a new update with Kane. All of these different little, you know, moments of snapping. This is just him on a slow build up towards what we're going to see in episode 7 or 8. Note number 5, at 4 minutes and 52 seconds in, Jax's teeth grow sharp and his head becomes 2D while being choked. This is not supposed to be immediately after the previous note, but this is where we're at. I apologize for that. But the point of this is we don't know what happens to him when he's holding his breath. However, this is the same exact thing that happens in episode 6 while Pomni is also choking him. And I know we see it one other time. I can't remember off the top of my head where, but we do see it one other time. This must be what happens to him when he holds his breath, when he can't get air into his body. His teeth grow sharp, his tongue does this like weird squiggly, and his face is extremely flat and 2D. That's what happens to him. He may not outright hold his breath, but when he can't get air in, that's his little, I guess you call it, animation for not being able to breathe. And by the way, this is all obviously in reference to, I believe it's episode 3 in the beginning, where they're all showing each other what happens when they hold their breath. So to go back a little bit to what I was talking about with Kane saying the word frisky, despite it obviously not being a very family-friendly word, at least in my opinion, which could totally just be my viewpoint. Note 1.6, or, you know, episode 1, note 6, 5 minutes, 12 seconds in, Kane is thinking with his fingers about the exit and the digital hallucinations. They pay a lot of attention here for an extended moment of silence to show you Kane's reaction to thinking about the exit door, right? And I think there's two ways to interpret this. Number one, he's thinking about the fact that he's making the exit door. He's making the exit to wherever it's going to be, and he's trying his best to finish his work. So he's probably thinking about how he can finish it to make sure nothing happens. At the same time, this hits me as a nervous tick. And if this is some sort of nervous tick for the AI of Kane, assuming he's an AI, to be thinking and nervous and concerned about the fact that she's also asking about the exit as well as Kaufmo, well, now there's a bit more to worry about, because he doesn't need another character to go through some sort of issue or long-standing problem with Kane specifically, and we're going to get to that a little bit on. further down the video. But Kane kind of tapping his fingers against his side or the air at the very least is fascinating, and I don't think it's enough attention because this shows, again, I truly do believe he's already losing it from like moment 1 of the series. He did not randomly start to snap. This has been coming up over time. 5 minutes and 31 seconds in for note number 7. Kane says, one of the things I don't have control over are your minds. Okay, so let's take a step back. That's not true. That is just a blatant lie. And the proof is Jax becoming vegan in episode 5, right? Because yes, you can make the argument, okay, maybe there's some sort of code in the character of Jax to be able to just not process meat and understand he's a vegan now. But at one point when he sits down at the bar, Jax does go, no, hold the egg white, I'm vegan. And he goes, wait, what was that? I thought Kane couldn't, and then he cuts himself off. Kane was able to manipulate Jax's mind. Yet here, he is clearly stating he cannot control your mind. So, is the fact that he later controlled somebody's mind proof that he is slipping even further? Or, and I think this is more likely, is it proof that he was already slipping from episode 1 where he lied about controlling your mind? Now, that's not to say it's like hypnotism and everything else. It's more so just he can't process that certain things are okay, not okay with human emotions, and as such, lying is seen as okay with his now faulty code because he's already cracking. 5:37, note number 8, very important here. Pomni's eyes have the same effect as note number 3. This is the same effect that we see on Jax in episode 6, and I don't know if we saw that eye effect. I feel like we didn't. We might have. We didn't. I don't think we did with Gangle in episode 4. But either way, we see here Pomni's eyes have that like scribbly effect on them. This is clearly not her abstracting. I'm almost certain, at least in this case, we don't see the edges of the screen dimming or anything like that. There's no heartbeat or pulsing to the screen. Nothing along that nature. This is just straight up Pomni having squiggly lines on her eyes, which I don't know. Maybe this was unintentional, but could very well mean that is not a showing of abstraction. That is showing of mental concern, of being worried and stuff like that on the digital plane in the digital circus. So, as such, with Jax, that's a point to him having a panic attack in episode 6 and not abstracting in episode 6, because now we can't say whenever a character has those eye lines, they are now abstracting. We can't say it now, because here is a clear example, I would consider a clear example of a non-abstraction case with that eye effect. So I would not consider those eyes that Jax has as any sort of indicator that he's abstracting. You could say that it is a part of abstracting because he was so mentally strained, but that is not, or mentally and emotionally, but that is not the same as saying that is a cause, is more so a symptom of abstracting, if at best anything. For note number 9. All right, this one I actually have, I think this is pretty cool and kind of interesting when you look at it from a certain point of view. So, we know that you can't say the word sex in the Amazing Digital Circus, right? Understandable. You cannot swear, you cannot cuss. If you slow down what Kane says, he says, your name may not include objectionable content. Objectionable content includes, but is not limited to, sexually explicit materials, obscene, defamatory, libelous, slanderous, violent, and or unlawful content or profanity. I understand I said libelous. I can't say that word. I'm sorry. I've tried. But what's interesting here is he says the words is not limited to sexually explicit materials, obscene, defamatory. So he said the word sexually explicit. However, this is what they would consider, under the Digital Circus user license agreement, not end user license agreement. That is a little like interesting tidbit that they did there. They didn't have an EULA, they had a ULA, which are two technically different things. They accomplish the same thing, but in different legal ways. This is not a legal video, so I'm not going to get into that right now. If you're more interested in that, watch my Call of Duty stuff. I have a couple videos about that. But anyways, it's interesting because he doesn't consider the word sexually to be a profane word to censor in the Amazing Digital Circus because he's reciting the user license agreement. Meaning there are, in fact, ways for the AI to override his restrictions. You see? Okay, so we now have proof that Kane is able to ignore the rules set upon him by the digital circus should it be equipable to a certain scenario. Now, you could make the argument that it is programmed in his AI to be able to say these things absolutely at certain points, because the user has to know what they can and can't do, and as such, it's not even part of the game at that point. It's more so a fourth wall break moment where he is explaining the rules of the game to the user. But this is Kane we're talking about, and at this point, we've already proven in my eyes that he is slowly cracking from episode 1, the very beginning. Therefore, the fact that he's able to say the word sexually explicit could very well mean, just as it could mean that this is just a ULA, and as a ULA, you have to tell the user so it's okay. It could also equally mean he's cracking, because he doesn't see it as an issue to censor. You know, he could have maybe had text pop up or something. He could have done it any other way, but instead he recites the user license agreement himself, albeit at a fast rate. Maybe him speaking fast is his way to censor it. Who knows? But it's fascinating that he still says that, and yet you can't swear or say non-family friendly things, just like the word frisky. So for note 10, this is the one that really kind of started making me think about Kane in a different light, because Kane has a manic laughing moment. Yes, you could say that this was done for fun or for, you know, whatever, for the show because it's the character. But I think this manic laughing is not supposed to be in the game. The way that he laughs is not at all I would call calm sense to laughter. And by having him laugh that way, I think that was a clear indicator in the very beginning that he's already cracking. He's already going crazy. This guy, he's already mentally kind of starting to get tired of the whole rigmarole of everything, because his point of life is slowly breaking down. And we see that with the other stuff, saying frisky, saying sexually explicit. One of the other things I said earlier, that for whatever reason, right, the finger tapping, he's thinking with his fingers, the nervous tick, and now he's laughing manically. Episode 1 showed us that he is not okay when you take these things individually and then put them together after analyzing them. He's already gone. This guy, he's cuckoo from the cuckoo's nest. I mean, he's gone. So, but anyways, yeah, just another little tidbit that he's going. For note number 11, Gangle is worried about Zubul. I don't think it takes much here to see what I'm saying as far as like me trying to prove a point, but what I'm saying is they were already close friends, and we see that definitely in the early episodes. But and we do see them in fact bond as the season goes on. And also, Gangle's personality is just being worried about everybody in general, being shyer and a bit, you know, on the sidelines more than rather be in the spotlight. I think that's supposed to be a little bit of a tidbit, like, hey, these two characters have a bond. You know, she's worried about Zubul. This is going to kind of flourish into something down the line. I do think this was positive foreshadowing. For note number 12, this is one of my favorite notes that I noticed. I couldn't believe I didn't see this my 4th or 5th time watching this. It took until I did this 2.5 hour ridiculous stupid thing. Anyway, Jack says she still thinks it's a dream and is looking directly into the camera. He breaks the 4th wall in episode 1, and I can't believe I didn't notice. Ragtha asks why he's looking at her like that. He's not. He's looking at the 4th wall. And as we see in episode 6, he's perfectly aware of this. This was a early foreshadowing of the fact that he's able to do that, and I just think that's awesome. So that was pretty cool. Just a fun little tidbit. I gotta stop saying that. I've said it like 4 times, 5 times now. Ugh. For note number 13, 925, I can't believe I didn't notice this until I looked at a lot of these details individually during this session, but there are 2 doors, one on the left, one on the right, that are easily visible with X's on them. These characters we have never heard of before, we don't know their names or anything else, and yet they have abstracted. We do not see Ribbit's door in the background. There's also 2 more doors behind them further when they're first walking down the hallway, showing a total of 4 doors with X's on them. And side note, I apologize to the developers of the fan game that I played on this YouTube channel a little while ago. It appears that they in fact modeled the characters after the characters in this show based on the doors, which amazing attention to detail, and I didn't think that they were part of the show, so I apologize in case any of those fan game devs are watching. 9 minutes 33 seconds, we see more great views of the hallway, but the mannequins have their own rooms. And that's interesting because these are NPCs. So my thought, maybe this is just whatever, but I'm thinking that these NPC rooms are taken over by the characters once they enter the digital circus, and as a placeholder, they are mannequin rooms until then. So all these rooms that have X's on them may or may not turn back into mannequin rooms as time goes on. I don't know. There is no way for us to know that right now, according to my current theory working in my head. But I can tell you this much. I think that the mannequin rooms aren't rooms where mannequins sleep. That's not how mannequins work. The mannequins are NPCs, and the NPCs house those doors, not literally, but figuratively, until a character is able to take over the door. It's like the idea of if, say, you're playing an MMORPG, and your character goes and interacts something, and now that has your character's face on it, like a plot of land or something. That's the same idea here, where your room becomes your room after it takes over a mannequin's room as a placeholder texture for the doors, I guess, symbol of whose room it actually is, so everybody knows who lives there. At 9:35, Pomni and Jax's rooms are directly across from each other. This, I think, was foreshadowing their connection. At 9:46, for note 17, Queenie and Kinger's rooms are side by side, which I think is awesome. For note 18, from 9:40 to 10:20, the rooms in the main cast are as follows: Ragatha, Jax, Kinger, Zubul, Gangle, and Pomni being the only character on the other side of the hallway. Now, this is fascinating me. This, I think, is really interesting because while there are other rooms on Pomni's side of the hallway of characters, they're all abstracted, right? And we know in many, many, many ways this show takes inspiration from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I'm going to briefly touch on a personal theory that I don't know if I'll ever actually fully do a video into. I don't know if I'll ever make a video again on the series, but I think Pomni is going to be the camel that broke the straw's back. Yeah, the straw that breaks the camel's back and ends up either being the first one to abstract or does not abstract, or, in the more likely option, is the reason why Kinger is the only one left behind in a digital circus who sacrifices himself for everybody else, causing them all to leave the digital circus after Zubul abstracts. All right, I threw a lot at you there, and you may now want to click off the video because you don't like my theory, and that's perfectly understandable. The point of what I'm trying to make here is the fact that Pomni's door is the only one away from the other main cast. It's not by accident. I promise you that is not by accident. That is not a choice. When you're making a story, I have yet to make a video game, but I know for a fact when you make a story and you pay attention to details, everything matters. And when you're in Blender and you're putting all these textures together, I do not foresee a team like Glitch and Gooseworks going, oh yeah, let's just put, let's randomly do Jax, Kinger, Zubul, Gangle, Pomni on the other side. Why not? No. There is some sort of symbolic nature behind that. And I do think it's because Pomni is going to be a key component in having Kinger successfully be able to stay back and sacrifice himself so the others can escape the circus. That's my theory based on his computer science and yada, yada, yada. I won't get into it, but yes, just pay attention to the fact that Pomni has a room away from everybody else. And note 19, at 10 minutes, 2 seconds, you see another mannequin room. Again, I think these are placeholders for the future characters of the game to come in. Which also, actually, now I'm saying that out loud, the game is pre-made for people to enter. So I wonder if these rooms... I wonder what happens to them after somebody logs off. Because as we know, this is a game that is not meant to be played forever for the rest of your life for your body to basically go into stasis. So I'm curious to see what would happen if somebody was able to leave without abstracting. If that would turn back into a mannequin symbol on the door. Like say Ragatha, right? Ragatha's door will probably turn back into a mannequin because that's no longer occupied by a player. So as she's logged out, you have a mannequin who's now able to take that room over for somebody else until she logs back in, or maybe it'll make a different server. I don't know. And if it's all the same server, then what happens to the other people in the other servers? And matter of fact, are there other servers with the game? We're getting into a rabbit hole. The point is, mannequins. For note number 20, at 10 minutes and 31 seconds, same as note 1.3, which is Pomni starts panicking and has the same exact reaction as Jax, and 1.8, where her eyes kind of go into that, like, special effect. She just has, like, those eyes that are just squiggly and everything else. And Jax even actually hits her. Jax hits, well, I say hits, he taps Pomni, which is a small showing of kindness from Jax to Pomni, because he's, I wouldn't say worried about her, but he's kind of like, hey, you alive? You okay? You good there, buddy? Like, he's more so just curious about her and where she's at that time. So, I don't know. I think the eyes are not an abstraction thing. I really don't. I say all that, but fail to mention you did have the effect around the border of the edge. So if you want to go even further, if I'm going to say that the eyes do not indicate anything about abstraction, and also the border doesn't indicate anything about abstraction, which means that there is no quote-unquote look to abstraction other than mental stress. So if a character has those squiggly lines on their eyes or a dark border around them or anything like that, that doesn't mean they're abstracting. It means that they're mentally strained, and that leads to abstraction. So I don't feel comfortable saying that Jax was about to abstract in episode 6 based solely on the visual cues. It's more so the story beats that caused him to almost abstract. I don't know if I set up at 10 minutes 31 seconds for note 20. Note 21. 10 minutes and 50 seconds into the pilot, Jax has a key to Kaufmo's room. This is an ongoing gag. We see it time and time again. But the reason why I point it out is in episode 6, and this is where finally we could say, okay, the reason why I did this is because of episode 6. Kinger made up a butterfly, but he's not, I guess you would say, able to always be in the right headspace to explain things to people. So for him to just say, I just made it up, to him it's whatever, like, you know, that's just where he's at right now. But for Jax, he's, I'm not gonna say smart enough, but he's able to say, I'm not gonna tell you anything about how I got these keys because I know what it could lead to. If you knew the power I had found, then that could lead to issues for me. So I think Jax was able to make something up. He realized you're able to just do whatever you want, i.e. the cartoon logic style of shooting a pistol that we see in episode 6. That doesn't make sense. You make up the rules. And if you're able to use your mind and make a butterfly, make the bullet do ricochets that are crazy, make up maybe keys, then how much control does Kane really have over the characters, even if he lies about not being able to control their minds? Because they can do whatever they want. So when Zubul says in later episodes, why not just let us be able to do whatever we want, i.e. episode 5 in the beginning with the lightning round episode of Untitled, well, they do. They're able to do anything they want. I think Jack's able to make up keys. Kinger's able to make up butterflies. You're able to shoot a bullet at a million different ways at once. This is all just stuff that you're able to do. We see even Kinger do it. We know Kinger is able to create things with the butterfly, and he has a special move of a ricochet bullet. I do think that Jax just made up the keys, and they work. Because why? He figured it out, and he's not going to tell anybody else, because why would he? That's something he wants to keep close to his chest. Alright, for note number 22, Kaufmo in his room drew the words "No Way Out," which is not noteworthy, but what is noteworthy is a vicious-looking Kane chasing Kaufmo. There is clearly a relationship between people who are obsessed with leaving the circus and finding the exit door and everything else, and Kane himself. He's got sharp teeth, crazy eyes as always, crazy tongue as always, with Kaufmo being chased by him. It's one thing for Kaufmo to have been obsessed with an exit. That is very understandable, and that's almost certainly what led to his abstraction. But why Kane? So I think Kaufmo realized Kane's ability to create an exit door and somehow associate him with chasing them down. I think that's a foreshadowing of the whole Am thing with the I have a mouth and I must scream, because there's no real reason that we are aware of to assume Kane is able to have a vendetta against keeping people insane. If that's the case, if Kaufmo truly felt that he was being chased by Kane as he drew on his wall when he's standing tall in his abstracted form, well, okay, A, why? And B, that's interesting, does Kane purposely push people to the edge? This shows that Kane is going out of his way to chase Kaufmo down the route of insanity, which could also be part of his finger tapping earlier. Could he have been thinking about Kaufmo and how he's going to deal with him later on? Who knows? For note number 23, this one, this is going to take kind of a dark turn, and I apologize about that, but this is fascinating stuff that has kind of haunted me since I learned about it when I was a lot younger. So, Kaufmo was clearly an artist. He drew a portrait of him and Gangle together, along with Gangle. I mean, he's clearly possesses some sort of artist kind of capability based on the quote-unquote graffiti on his walls and everything else. But here, we actually get to see some of his real quote-unquote paintings. And as soon as I saw his full room during this 2.5 hour session, I immediately thought of William Utermohlen, I think is how you pronounce that. I don't remember, and I apologize, it's a difficult name for me to pronounce, but look it up. I'll have the name to this artist in the description below. And if you're in a happy mood, I recommend looking into it. Don't look into it if you're in a sad mood. It's going to make it a lot worse. But do look into it at some point, because it's a very darkly human analysis of what happens when you have Alzheimer's with memory and more so motor skill and abilities with talent. He was a painter, and he started painting self-portraits as he went along in his disease, and it went from really remarkable work to work that I cannot properly describe without being overly purple prose. It's absolutely devastating to look at, and it really does make you thankful. It makes me thankful for what God gives us every day, those of us who are healthy, and how we should really try our best to help those who are less fortunate. But I'm not going to go on that rant right now. Again, it's a very heavy subject with that character. So, with that individual, forgive me. So, with Kaufmo here, I do think there is a little bit of an homage to that. Now, don't get me wrong, right? It's not like it's a new thing on this planet Earth to say an artist going crazy, quote unquote. His paintings get more and more crazy. But at the same time, with that being something that really just stuck with me, and I look at this and I see a creepy clown. I mean, there's Kaufmo, who looks like how Kaufmo should, and then there's Kaufmo on the painting, which just looks absolutely terrifying, and then there's an unrecognizable mass of teeth and eyes and creatures. You have paintings of abstractions, which is really kind of curious to me. One painting even has the word Y on it, because he knew he was abstracting, and that puts a lot of what Kinger went through with his wife into a different light. Abstraction is not just the changing of the mind and the body, it's also the twisting of those things as well, right? So with these paintings, we're looking at it, and at first I thought, well, you know, is this him maybe painting other characters who had abstracted? Because how in the world are you going to be able to paint when you're abstracted? I mean, you don't got opposable thumbs, buddy. But that's not the point. The point is, it shows you he still was able, up until he fully abstracted, to paint. But his art really changed for the worse, and even his self-portrait, just like William U, it became unrecognizable almost, to the point of, for lack of a better word, insanity. So a little bit of history fact there. Look into that. Again, I'll leave his name in the description. But also, it's fascinating with the nature of abstraction, because there's even a painting of him in his room with him standing at his doorway. Like, I mean, come on. Come on, you can't get much more on the nose than that. So, this is very interesting stuff. The nature of abstraction is, in my opinion, has really been overlooked a little bit. I think that there should be a bit more focus on what does this do to the person being abstracted, and not just because of Kinger's wife, but even in isolation. So, moving on. That's at 11 minutes and 18 seconds. Literally a minute after the previous note, by the way. For note 124, 11 minutes and 25 seconds in, there is another character door who had abstracted right behind Ragatha that we have not seen or heard of before. For note number 125, at 12 minutes and 30 seconds in, there is a growl from Kaufmo, which begs the question of the nature of what happens after you fully abstracted, not just while you're abstracting, but the fact that there's a guttural animal growl at a gloink. What does that mean for really just kind of the mental state? Is there a mental state, you know? I mean, we see with Kinger, he's able to take Queenie back to a place of some humanity before being sent to the Cella. But here we have a character who's gone, and it's now something else. So at note 26, at 13 minutes 36 seconds in, we hear another growl from Kaufmo after Kinger says it's good to know he hasn't completely lost his mind. At this point, I started thinking, why is it that, you know, yes, it's the same character and everything else, but they treat it as though it's somebody else. Like Kaufmo abstracted, now it's a creature. Well, not just because of the way they act, but what if, now, this is just me spitballing theories out there with no basis or ability to, at the moment, defend them. What if it's an NPC? So we know with Queenie, right, she was able to kind of be reined back in a little bit with Kinger in the dark. But with Kaufmo, we don't see that potentially happening. All we see is the ramifications of what happens after somebody abstracts. If we have to deal with somebody who completely abstracts as a different creature altogether, well, who's to say it's not the replacement of Kaufmo, but rather the corruption of his character texture file being completely skewed by the program itself, and then now the character is gone and have been replaced by a corrupted NPC, i.e. Missing No from Pokemon. I don't know. I don't know if that's a stupid theory. I don't know if that's ridiculous. That's already well known as truth or false. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is some connection between the abstracted form of Kaufmo and Queenie after Queenie, albeit, was mentally gone after the whole thing with the Dark and Kinger, and the character texture being corrupted and now is replaced by an NPC created by the game to fill the spot in an empty block of code that shouldn't be empty. I don't know, just a thought. Also, by the way, that was at 13:37. Leaked. Note 27, 16 minutes and 20 seconds in, we see through the eyes of Kaufmo, who, after being abstracted, of course. What does this show us? It shows that he has eyes and he is able to process things and what it looks like through his eyes, which isn't that different from being human. So is there still humanity behind those eyes? Or, again, is this an NPC taken over and now using the characteristics that Cosmo left behind, i.e. vision, sight, smell, hearing, and all that, the senses, to its ability to maybe try and abstract other creatures, glitch them out, spread the corruption almost like a virus? What if abstraction is a virus? Anyway, that's 16 and 20. At 18 minutes 31 seconds for note number 28, there are two posters as soon as Pomni enters the CNA office rooms. There is one of a circus with some sort of glowing figure in the front, almost doing like a ballerina dance. It's very uncanny. And another of a face. I cannot make heads or tails of this. I can't even begin to guess what any of this means. The face is terrifying enough, let alone the surreal art of the circus thing. It's disturbing on a way that I didn't expect when I first saw it during the session, where I was watching this for 2.5 hours. I didn't expect that, and it's fascinating to see who is that face. That face was there for a reason. Whoever put that there in Blender put it there for a reason. It's not just some regular texture photo of like a poster that is probably even custom made. Why? Who is it? And what connection does that face have with CNA? I really think there is more to that poster than has ever been discussed, and I'm fascinated to see why. At 19 minutes and 29 seconds, note number 29, Kinger asks Zubul if they experienced a game show inside the Gloink Queen. Could he possibly know the inner workings of a glowing queen? He is a computer scientist. And if he's potentially from CNA, what if he had to do with creating some sort of enemy NPC where you go into it, and instead of just dying like in a normal game, because it's supposed to be for all ages, you are faced with a games show. And this is him a little bit, because it is also a darker part of the map that we've seen than the rest, compared to the rest of the place. He is somewhat cognizant here, and Zubul outright responds saying, "What are you talking about?" Meaning, this isn't just throwaway line. What? Like, what are you talking about? This is specifically pointed out to us, the viewers, because it has some sort of semblance to Kinger being involved with the Glowing Queen with his 7 years of computer science degree, possibly being involved with the creation of the digital circus, and knowing what you could possibly face inside the Glowing Queen. And it's possible, maybe, that Zubul was not inside the Glowing Queen long enough because of the outer world, outside world impact of, you know, Kaufmo being abstracted to spit out Zubul before they could actually experience a proper game show. At 20 minutes and 53 seconds in, this is very well known, Pomni stares at a computer with a virtual reality headset sitting on it. Remember, she had mentioned in episode 5 that she goes around to explore abandoned buildings. Is it possible that this is the same exact desk that she was at, and we are looking literally at where she is in real life in the office? Could CNA be in an abandoned building? She saw it, put on the VR headset, and now we're here. And the reason why she laughs maniacally at it is because she realizes kind of that is where she was. She may not remember a whole lot from before then, but I think she even subconsciously realizes, I'm where I last was when I was in the real world. I said that very clunkily, but you know what I mean. I think we are looking literally at her body right now when she's looking at that, just from the virtual reality perspective. For note number 31, you can order Kane's Wacky Watch at the amazing number of 1-800-402-68 close parenthesis. Thank you, WD Gaster. Thank you, Windings. So for note number 32, at 23 minutes and 13 seconds in, Kane it says he made the exit door. He knew how badly he wanted others there to be an exit, so he tried to make one to make them happy. Does he care? Now, honestly, this is Kane episode 1. Even though he's already cracking at the seams, he's not completely like episode 6 Kane, where he's looking at the CNA office building through his Polaroid photos, which, who knows where he got those? Could it be Queenie's? I don't know. I don't really kind of care, because the point of what I'm saying here is he clearly wants there to be some sort of happiness within the characters to keep them appeased. He does care about their well-being so far as to make sure that they're going on his adventures, that they are well taken care of. It is literally his programming. This is how he was designed. So for him to almost in his own way apologize that the room was empty into the void, well, that's because he might actually legitimately feel bad. Like, there is a part of him that wanted them to be happy. And we don't really see this in any other place, more or less. We see him fix Gangle's mask at one point and a couple other things. But on the whole, this is Kane kind of at his nicest throughout the entire series, which I think says a lot. I really do. I think it says a lot right there. He tried to make him happy. He does somewhat care. At 23 minutes and 51 seconds in, Kinger explains the inner workings of the digital circus and its impacts on digital versus physical sensations of eating, hunger, sleep, etc. Jax dismisses him completely. This right here is extremely important. This is, I think, what fuels a lot of the theories about Kinger being involved with the CNA offices, because he is explaining how it works. Not just, oh, I think it makes you want hunger or want food or want food, want to drink or anything like that. No, he is literally telling them how it is as a fact. Even though he has 7 years of computer science degree, and yeah, he probably understands that, you know, they're all wearing virtual reality headsets, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's able to explain the inner workings of the digital circus. That's just something that's interesting, and Jax dismisses him as a crazy guy, because that's just who Kinger is. Oh, he's crazy. But it's funny because Jax is the one who puts him into stereotypes, and he knows he's doing that as a defense mechanism, and yet here he is denying when somebody breaks that stereotype, showing just how knee-deep into the archetype, stereotype, caricature of everybody that they represent. So there's a lot there that does coincide well with episode 6, and he's just dismissing Kinger because he's the crazy one. But yet here, had they maybe pulled that thread a little bit, they could have heard a lot more that maybe even could have led to Kinger saying, yeah, I used to work for them. Who knows? Alright, and lastly, for note 34, at 24 minutes and 19 seconds, Pomni is a symbolic character of Jesus with Jax to her left, just like how Judas is to the left of Jesus according to the scripture during the Last Supper. Now, I don't really want to touch this 110-foot pole. Namely, because while I think it's fascinating and interesting, there are people who are far better educated on this stuff than I. I will say, according to scripture, it is fairly kind of simple to determine that Judas was to the left of Jesus. When Jesus was asked who will be the betrayer of the Christ, he says, it will be the one to which I give the morsel and bowl, or something along those lines. Paraphrasing the Bible, I apologize. And he gives it to Judas. Well, it is customary when handing out food to give it to the place of place of honor. I'm sorry, it's 2 a.m. Place of honor, the guest of honor, and that is to the left of the host. And in this case, Jesus, acting as host, gives it to Judas, which would mean he's to his left. That is just one example of the few different types of evidence that Judas is to the left of Jesus and Peter is to the right of Jesus. Does that mean, if we're going through that logic, that Judas would be Jax, who would be the betrayer of Pomni? Yes, that makes sense. And Peter would be Gangle. I guess I don't see that nearly as much. And that would also possibly mean that John would be Kinger. And I'm not recalling exactly who would be to the left of Judas. I apologize. I'm not quite sure who Zubul would be. But interestingly, Zubul has always been an interesting one because... say interesting many times. Because Zubul also wasn't in the intermission. That's also why I think Zubul is going to be the first one to really cause the issues with abstraction, because everybody's talking about the bowling ball and the cake. Well, Zubul wasn't even in it to begin with, so, you know, that's important. With the intermission during episode 5. But even so, with the Last Supper whole symbolic religious thing itself, yes, in this case, Judas would be to the left of Jesus, which would be Jax to Pomni, and Peter and John would be Gangle and Kinger in that order to the right of Pomni, with Pomni in the center being the sacrificial lamb of the show, which there's a lot to say there. There's a lot to say there, and also remember, she is the main protagonist that we follow along closer than any other character. So is it highly possible that she ends up being the sacrifice instead of Kinger? Yes. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And also mind you that Goosework said the next one who would abstract, not will, would abstract, would be the one that we least expect, and nobody ever talked about Zubul. Like, yeah, people say might get killed. What if Zubul abstracts? And then that causes other characters to have to make tough decisions about where they're at in their life. And somehow, say Pomni is able to sacrifice herself to save the others. And then Kinger makes the ultimate sacrifice. I don't know. There's a lot there. I'm not going to get into other theories. But that is the last note. I'm not going to go any further into it because I could talk about that for a long time. That is 34 things I noticed that may or may not possibly be interesting for the Amazing Digital Circus. I've been recording for an hour and 20 minutes, so I'm sorry if I'm a little... but thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please hit that like button. Show your support because I'm making more videos just like this one. Don't expect too many on the Amazing Digital Circus. I did the fan game. I did this one because I thought this would be fun. Maybe I'll do one like this for the other episodes as well. Maybe. But if not, you know, it is what it is. At the very least, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you learned something, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. If you think I have stupid ideas, let me know. I definitely think I have stupid ideas. Again, just to recap, if I said note 1 point whatever, that's because it was episode 1, note 19, 1.19, for example, and then the time code after that as well, timestamp, I should say. And a lot of these, again, were just interesting things I noticed, not necessarily evidence of anything, but just things that I think either support my theories or help support other theories as well, or just in general points of interest that are either fun facts or little things that I feel like don't get talked about enough. So, with all that said, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button, support, get more of my videos just like this one. And remember that someone loves you, even if they don't know it yet. And Jesus loves you. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Have a blessed rest of your night. And I hope to see you all later. Take it easy. Take care. And goodbye. Thank you so much to our current channel members. In the old days tier, we have Sinful Gaming. In the modern times, we have Lord Taco, Adam Scon, Tree, Flames, Superbench 45, The Cheese King, Jack, Askell Rose, The Purest Vanilla Cookie, That Special One, Mateo Marquez, and Grezu Tortuguita. And in the future tier, we have Apocalypse Super. Thank you all so much for your support and your continued motivation for me to make these videos. It means the most to me, and I appreciate each and every single one of you. Thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart. I love you all.